Okay, thanks everyone. So we've got our farmer perspective panel here with our farmers and farm association representatives. It's going to be a bit of a sheep-focused panel, unfortunately for Jen. But I think that we've already talked a lot about sheep. I think there's some interesting stories to keep going. But just going to hop in really quick. We've got Erin Morgan at the end with Ontario Sheep Farmers. Erin has experience in a few different sectors: grains, beans, sheep, co-ops. So I think you're probably thinking a lot about other things as you're hearing the conversation here. So I'm interested to see if that makes its way into the sheep discussion. Jen is a risk management professional, deep roots in insurance, one of the founders of Women in Renewables, has been someone very involved in our discussions in Agrivoltaics, a big supporter and keen to hear, and a farmer, partner in a farm, and dabbling in a number of different farming-related enterprises. Jana and Rafel, both sheep growers. Jana's coming in from Alberta, which is, as we said, was on fire up until about a few months ago for solar expansion, and obviously, had there been more Whispering Cedars activities, I think, and videos that I'm going to recommend everybody go and check out after this. Over the last couple of years, I think maybe some of the policy directives that have happened in Alberta would have been a little bit different with Jana and her husband Ryan's voice here. So, and then Rafel Lara, he's spoken a little bit about his experience at the CCL project, the Grand River project, and brings an interesting Ontario perspective to a market that has historically been shut down for the last little while, and this is kind of what we're talking about, opening things up, hopefully, out of this conference. So without further discussion, I'm going to pass this to Erin so she can quickly introduce herself and the organization.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. I put together just a couple of slides about a project that we're embarking on at Ontario Sheep Farmers. Thank you. Just because I'm really hopeful that people in this room will partner with us on this project. And so I'll just get into it. I just thought it would be really great to have a little context here for those in this room that are not sheep farmers. The blue line, or the blue bars here, are domestic production. And you can see from about 2003 until now, so the last 20 years, it's been pretty stable sheep production in Ontario. And the gray bars at the top are imports. And so you can see that things are pretty stable here. And you might wonder, why are we not, obviously there's a market opportunity here. Why aren't we producing so many more sheep? Why aren't we displacing imports? And basically the bottom line here is those imports are coming into Ontario at a lower price point. Sheep production in Ontario, the costs of sheep production in Ontario don't compare to the large numbers of sheep that graze in New Zealand and Australia. And so when it comes to production of sheep, this is basically where we are stable. This is where our processing capacity lives, is here. And so if we're going to start to go into that gray bar and take on some new opportunities, especially with this group in here with Agrivoltaics, the opportunity has to increase income for our producers in a way that will help if we're going to displace imports. So it's an economic picture here for you. So when we're looking at this opportunity at Ontario Sheep Farmers, what we'd like to do, what we always do, is try and set up ways for our producers to be successful. And we have some producers who are sort of early adopters, and they're on this panel. And there are going to be other producers who are going to be more interested in a slower, getting into the opportunity with more educational information. And so we're producing a new course. It's a certification course. We have some money from the University of Guelph for a for the development of the course. We've hired a master's student at the university, and we're basically pulling together all of the resources that we can get our hands on to support producers who might want to take this on as an opportunity, an income earning opportunity. And so we have lots of different modules that we're pulling together. Right now, we're at the very early stages of just like gathering all the resources that we can get our hands on. And under these headings, and we'll probably come across more as we go. And then the next phase after we have gathered all the resources is to hire some of our farmers who are early adopters to help guide us in creating resources to fill in the gaps and or to create Ontario-specific parts of the modules. And I should also point out, Ashley Scott's here from Alberta Lamb Producers. She's sitting in the back row. Ashley, wave. So Ashley at Alberta Lamb Producers has created, they've created modules to support more of the production side of the farming, you know, when it comes to grazing support, so the nutrition side, the land management side, and what we're creating here is more on the business side. And so we're very much encouraging producers to take the Alberta courses first, and then to design their business using our modules. So at the end, you end up with a business plan and the financials, and then we're hoping to partner everybody who graduates with a certificate with a mentor, somebody who's already doing it, to take a look at their business plan and to give them input, feedback on what they've created. So that's pretty much, yeah, sums up what we're working on.
Sure. Hey everyone, as Mike said, Jen Aitchison. I've spent a great deal of time at the intersection of insurance, risk management, and renewable energy, and more recently adding agriculture to that. So we bought a farm, 25-acre farm, about 3 years ago, and our primary crops are honey. So we have about 150 beehives, some of which are deployed at solar farms. So we spend a bit of time at solar farms around the Kawartha Lakes area, and we have a number of hives there. But we're also looking at adding, with our crops, we also have garlic, tomatoes, potatoes, carrots, and a small orchard. So we're looking at how to incorporate agrivoltaics into that. We have a small 8-kilowatt system that supports the farm, but it's definitely not agrivoltaic in nature. It's a ground mount just sitting in a field that we have access to. But I think there's an awful lot of opportunity to value stacks. The other thing I've learned in the last 3 years farming is that there's not a lot of money in produce. Not a lot of money in farming unless you want to be one of those farms that is like an adventure farm where you have people come and pay $20 for their family to come and have the farm experience. While we do a bunch of apiary education, we have a beehive that we take to schools and offer field trips to the farm. It's certainly not something that we're going to be looking to make money at. But electricity, risk managing, access to affordable, clean electricity, as well as affordable food that's locally grown is really important to us. So that's what brings me here.
Well done. Okay, hello everyone. I'm Jana. As Mike said, I'm from Alberta. If my boots didn't give it away, it's okay. I washed the shit off them before we came. So I am a co-founder with my husband, Ryan, over there with Solar Sheep, Inc. I'm a first-generation farmer. I've been producing sheep for about 12 years now. We've recently expanded our business to kind of include 3 parts, including vegetation management on solar sites, doing a lot of consulting both with producers and with solar developers, and then the equipment and seed sales that go along with the development and the actual honing in more on the equipment to actually do the work for producers. So like I said, we utilize our sheep to provide vegetation management on large-scale utility solar projects. We're one of the few producers in Alberta that are actually doing this. We're currently on a 41 megawatt project with discussions of a 140 megawatt project. So lots of land to graze, lots of animals needed to actually do that. The most actually exciting part for me has been the consulting piece. I'm also a registered nurse, and with that, I've had many students over the years, so having the opportunity to educate others, both from a producer's perspective and also to solar developers on how to perform the right soil analysis, choosing the right seed mixture to allow for livestock on site, that kind of thing. Trying to get basically involved from the ground up and be a part of that from the beginning so that, both ourselves and other producers are successful in doing that. We're also in the works of evaluating some multi-species grazing. So obviously sheep aren't the be-all end-all, as much as I'd love to say that because I love them. I think we need to think a little bit bigger. And so Ryan and I are kind of diving into that a little bit to see what that might look like. So this panel is all about the farmer's perspective. So that's why we're here, to kind of pick each other's brain and learn from each other and answer the questions you have. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Rafel. I'm a Brazilian that is here in Canada for 5 years. So basically what made me come here to Canada is being the opportunity to really make my living out of farming. Because in Brazil, or you are a big farmer, or you cannot make the living. You need to be just like a poor guy working to survive. I work to eat. So so I'm here since 18. I started work with pigs, and then cattle, and finally sheep. That's where I realized sheep in at least Southern Ontario is the perfect animal for here. Cattle is too heavy. Our environment is not great for cattle because too muddy. And then I realized sheep is the best, and luckily, or God, or I don't know why, I got in the sheep industry. And then I start making plans to make that like a real work to bring that profitable, because the company who, like Schuyler's farm is who I'm partner now, they start professionalizing the company, and I need to show results. So in order to show those results, I start looking for opportunities. That's when solar farms shows up, and that was the game change. Because otherwise I was worrying about hey, can I keep my work or not? Because it doesn't make sense. Nobody's making money with farm. And now I'm realizing after all this, today, everything we discussed here, I remember there was a question about is that how we prove that making more money than before? And my answer is pretty simple. Now we have the opportunity to have a 50-acre farm, and you have a living off that. So before we couldn't. It's I doubt someone here this. Oh, I'm a family farmers, 50 acre, I'm gonna make a good living. So now you can rent the farm, make the profit of the renting the for the solar farms. You still can do the vegetation management. That's a business. That's a good job, and you already have the lambs, so you can sell lambs. So now that comes to another big business that can shows up now, because we were having a discussion before. I don't see who, but anyways, there's 100,000 acres already here in Ontario, isn't it right? It's kind of it's already there. We can change things economic things, all that graphics saying about the imports, that can change, because we can be big. We can I was discussing with Mike on the phone before. I came from Brazil, and we are big meat producers, and big country like Canada. And when we think about importing meat, it's unacceptable for us there. And I thought it was the same in Canada. But when I came here, I see okay, we are importing 70% of the lamb from the other side of the world. So the lambs need to cross the world to come here, and then say, why? Doesn't make sense at all. We're in the second country in the world. And that's why I fell in love with that situation, because it's just perfect. Sheep and solar, they are made for each other. Don't get me wrong about the cattle people, about vegetables, but sheep is already reality. That's not something that can be done. That's like we want to make like the panel vertical. The sheep can adapt. We're going to make like a horizontal. The sheep can adapt. 5 meters high, touching the ground, the sheep can adapt. So that's the big thing for sheep. They can adapt for whatever. So like I can be all day saying about why sheep is good, but I don't want to take somebody else's time there.
Well, I want to ask some other people about that point, because I think your point about, so maybe I'll just quickly talk into the mic here so they can hear, but when we were talking before, just I think Rafel sort of corrected me a little bit in when I was talking about more sheep being more of like a service to renewable as opposed to the true practice of farming that is being facilitated and improved through the integration of the solar grazing. And again, this is the farmer perspective panel, so I want to hear from, and I know we have a lot of farmers or farm families or farm friends in the audience, and that's something we're making an active effort to talk about. So improved farming. Jana, I want to hear your thoughts. Jen, I know you have some different operation. I'm going to throw this out there. I would say when I first started talking agrivoltaics, I would say, no, we're talking more than just sheep and bees. Here's sheep and bee people here on the panel, and I'm saying something rather hopefully contentious. So I would love to hear what you have to say, Jen, and then maybe Erin, you can talk a little bit more broadly about the market opportunity, the ECDEV opportunity for the country.
I think for us, the biggest thing was, as Rafel said, land access. I mean, we're in a pretty prime location in Alberta and only on 100 acres. And so in order to make a living in sheep, you need pretty high volumes of them for it to be profitable. So it opened up a whole new opportunity for us in terms of, the hundreds and hundreds of acres that are now available for us to expand. So there's been a lot of positives for us, for sure.
Yeah, I think in the bee perspective, we ran out of space pretty quickly. Before we bought the farm, we were living, I was living in Leaside in a really small house with not a lot of acres, with 2 beehives in the backyard, and my partner was living in Port Credit with a 100 by 50 foot lot and 5 beehives behind him. And so it became pretty apparent that we needed to expand elsewhere. So we started with rooftops actually in Toronto on Harbourfront Centre, a couple of businesses and catering companies in downtown Toronto. Outgrew that pretty quickly, and the cost of driving around to places and going up and down two floors with, a makeshift bee lift on a ladder like you would see roofers bringing up pallets of roofing shingles. And it wasn't really economical. The cost of jars wasn't really economical. It just didn't make a whole pile of sense. And so we started talking to folks that we knew that had solar farms. So I've been in the insurance industry a long time. A lot of my clients had solar farms and had lots of acreage, lots of space. And so we were able to get a few locations that were on solar farms, a couple of golf courses, and other friends in the solar space that had acreages that they were living on. So it made a lot of sense for us to expand. I'd be curious to hear what the cost differential is, though, between New Zealand lamb and Canadian lamb, and well, maybe you guys know. I don't know. Somebody must know what the cost delta is, because how far do we have to come in order to close that gap? Because I've gone in. We tried to look at sheep as well a couple of years ago, and I shut it down really quickly because from an ROI business perspective, it made 0 sense for us to invest in that in Ontario, based on what people were paying for vegetation management, what the cost of keeping the sheep and feeding the sheep was, and then going into some friends that own butcher shops. They were like, the price that you have to charge us is not going to make sense. How is New Zealand able to do that? Maybe nobody can answer this here, but I would love that answer to close that gap.
I can't give you the specific numbers, but it's grazing. I mean, they can graze.
Yeah, it's cost of production.
Right. Yeah. They don't have snow cover.
Winter is the biggest thing for us here in Canada.
Yeah.
So we have this barrier to make, like, I don't know what word to use, like that's what makes the cost higher, is like the winter. Winter feed is the biggest thing.
Well, keeping animals alive just generally in the winter, we've realized is difficult. We do pigs, chickens, and ducks, and that's enough. But sheep, I can imagine in the Ontario wet cold as opposed to the Alberta dry cold is different.
Yeah,
right?
so like everything I do in the summer is to prepare for winter. and everything I do in the winter is prepare for summer. So like it's pretty interesting because I'm Brazilian, so like I never saw snow before. So like when I got here and I had like a lot of videos from Alberta how to keep water, all this stuff. So that's pretty cost.
Right, but what's the cost per pound? I guess what my question
It's
is
hard
really
to say.
Cost per pound from New Zealand versus cost per pound in Canada.
But they don't get paid to graze, right? So that's the big thing. They have the lands, but poor quality lands. So even when they're in the summer, they don't have the same grass that we can have here. And they don't get paid to graze. We do.
Right, so why are we more expensive than New Zealand?
Because we are small. We didn't have this yet. So like, for example, I have like a price here. When we're gonna buy a lamb and then gonna flip lamb. So like just finishing them. We're gonna buy more expensive. Why? Because we don't have that many people, because we don't have federal license kill plants, for example. So when you go,
Abattoirs?
yeah, so like right now I'm in the phase of finding the federal plant to butcher, and like I found one in Ontario. Otherwise I need to go to Quebec that I couldn't even find them. So like it's just because they're not federal license. We have a ton of Ontario. Okay, if we're gonna sell for Ontario store, that's fine. But like when you go Costco, for example, the numbers we have, they sell. Why you don't buy lambs from Ontario? I said we don't have. That's the only reason we don't buy. And then when I see that, I say, that's something wrong here, because they just don't have enough.
Can I put a question then back to you guys here just on that? Like, so on that note, so let's assume we're making sheep, there's a lamb business case to grow. How many, what could the market absorb? Is it a price issue? If lamb were to drop by 10% in cost or 15% in cost per pound, is there significant room to grow to eat up the import numbers, or maybe even grow the bucket altogether? And if so, what do you need to see in Alberta to make that, like what do you think sheep growers in Alberta could tolerate from if we were able to make this a bit more of a business that's going to save money?
What do you mean by tolerate? Like, I think we don't.
Do you think it could grow? Do you think the sheep industry could grow with agrivoltaic type practices, offsetting costs ultimately of the meat and making the business more profitable? Is there a massive growth opportunity for moving in?
I think that you could, because I mean right now the reason we have all of these imports coming in is because we don't grow enough to meet our own demand. We simply don't. So
And what we have is feedlots.
yeah, but then again, the problem is to get into it is challenging. It's huge overhead capital, not only in the animals and the infrastructure, but I guess that's kind of where we've seen this huge synergy with solar. And you know, we speak to some of the positives. Obviously, it's an opportunity for people to get into it who aren't into it. There's room for expansion. I mean, some of the positives we've even seen having our animals out there is, you know, access to shade and shelter. We're in the dry ass prairies with very little trees. So having access to shelter and shade for our animals has been huge for us. We've seen, you know, an extended grazing season. We've been able to have our animals out there sooner and stay out there longer, which is huge for us when you're talking about, you know, cost of production to feed those animals for, you know, extended months at a time. And some of the other things we've seen too is, you know, the nutrition. Like I said, getting involved from the beginning, making the seed selection and the plant choices up front means that you're going to have nutrition that's on par or better with what you have at home. And if you're expecting your animals to go out there and perform a service, to graze the land and manage the vegetation, you need to ensure that, you know, if you've got a ewe out there that's lactating twin lambs, she needs to provide milk plus grow 2 lambs at the same time. So those are all kind of the positive things we've seen in that. But I mean, with that too, I mean, there's been challenges too. And I think we need to talk a little bit about those because there are. I mean, a lot of that comes to the design and the layout. Some of the things we've talked about today, the cabling and the drive shafts, making the row spacing a bit bigger. not necessarily a challenge for us, but the biggest thing I always preach to others is that the reason we charge for it is because of the amount of time it consumes. It's an extremely time-consuming job. You're out there doing tons of fencing. And I think the other biggest thing we found too is because you're out there as a contractor, some sites allow you to have, younger kids out there helping you, some sites don't. And that, I think, is a particular challenge in ag, where you have young families who want to engage their children. That's one of the reasons people choose that type of lifestyle. So that's kind of the downsides we've found anyways.
And I think you also touched on abattoir issues. We've run into that with pork. There's very, very minimal. So that's the other thing is being able to actually process your meat. So an increase in growing lambs is going to mean an increase in demand on the abattoirs, and there simply aren't enough, and that's its own challenge separate to this. The other thing I wanted to touch on is completely outside of sheep, and it was mentioned earlier by Kevin, was cattle. And because I come from the insurance industry and risk management, I still spend a great deal of time and brainpower in that realm. Cattle is not something the insurance industry is gonna allow, at least in Canada, likely not in the US, because they're similar markets. They're just so big. They're so big and they're so itchy, and they really, really like to scratch on things. We investigated getting into cattle, and we'll probably do one or two, but not in any mass, and I don't think from an agrivoltaics perspective it'll make sense. And the goats, I'm really glad I didn't know that they were there. Because the insurance industry would have lost their shit. I would have lost my shit. They're destructive. They chew everything. They jump on stuff, they break stuff, and they get bored really easily. I suppose, I get into a discussion with a good friend of mine on Vancouver Island. She loves goats. She spends her life hanging out with goats and entertaining goats, and she's like, they're only destructive because they get bored like 2-year-olds. They're like giant toddlers. But that's why you don't see things like that. And then hay is the other thing I know you guys tried. And there's not a chance that anything that's dry and tall is going to go with the insurance industry and the wildfire risk that exists right now. They require significant vegetation management plans, which is why they really like sheep, as long as the rotation is consistent enough. Because the other thing that we've seen with sheep is you have to make sure that the rotation is consistent and on point, or else you will not get the vegetation management that you need to avoid that wildfire risk. And I can tell you there's hundreds of millions of dollars that have been paid out in the last 2 years alone in solar farms specifically. And then the other thing to consider is when you're looking at tilt angles, especially in Alberta where you're in a hail belt, is making sure that those arrays are in a position that they can actually track and stow in certain positions for wind loading and hail at the same time to avoid that risk.
Erin, you don't need to pass it back, but Erin, I just want to maybe comment quickly before we are going to run out of time here, but Sheep Farmers Ontario, we've got I think, an example here where I would say this is an agricultural benefit, improvement opportunities for growers. While we also have other farming associations that don't necessarily align on use of productive land, and it's maybe it's quite a contentious issue that maybe those in the audience aren't entirely familiar with, but there are positions, particularly the Ontario Federation of Agriculture has a very strong position on not using, not having generation on productive land. And I think that comes from a good place historically, but we're talking about use cases now and opportunities now that are different. I think sheep farming is really at the leading front of a lot of that discussion because of just the immediate commercial advantages for the growers. Is there any position or discussion or activity that maybe we could do to engage with our OFA representatives or
Absolutely.
Position?
Well, there's new leadership at OFA, so now it would be a great time to go and have another conversation. I can't be sure what they're going to say moving forward, but definitely we would be open to talking with you. And I know if we can look for marginal land or not as productive land to expand Northern Ontario, Eastern Ontario, that's another area where there's a really great opportunity to graze sheep, and OFA be very happy with that story. And the Minister of Agriculture I've been told as much as we can do to expand grazing into areas that maybe aren't counted today in the agricultural land count. That is a huge opportunity because the minister is getting beaten up by different groups because farmland is declining. And if we can get that farmland back into production, especially into a good news story like agrivoltaics, then that's an opportunity for both of our groups.
You guys have the solar farm that's already there. We can start there and expand. So
For sure. Well, I think we've got a few minutes left. Any questions from the audience? Nope.
I was just curious, Jana, you mentioned animals other than sheep. Which types of animals are you investigating?
They're cute and they oink a little bit.
But they're not rooters, right?
But they're not rooters. No, we're aiming at pigs that actually will graze in a similar fashion to like a sheep or a cow would.
And the big advantage is the perimeter fence on solar farms. It's a proper. Like that's one of the things that's amazing for farming in the solar farms is the perimeter fence. It's a fantastic. You'll never have a farm that's so, because I had a bit of experience with pigs, grazing pigs, and they are terrible. They're so smart that they learn when the fence is off or they are just learn. And
Well, I think that that's a consideration on the developer piece too, is yes, just because the fence is chain link doesn't mean it's keeping everything in and everything out.
but helps, right? So
Yeah.
that's the advantage for having pigs on solar farms. It's the perimeter fence, in my view. Otherwise, if you lose one pig, it's going to be a wild pig. And
Oh, and they all follow too. I've had to chase pigs back into their enclosure on a number of occasions, and they're big and they're smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need to be rotational. If
Yeah.
you leave them there, they're going to destroy everything.
Have you guys worked with any developers on water management? Like, if you're out in the middle of it, I'm assuming you want access to water for your livestock. Have you figured out, or is there something that works?
Yeah, so we've been blessed in that the water that we do get is like 5 minutes away. It's nice and close to bring it in. But I mean, in other sites we're talking about, we're talking Alberta, so there's irrigation that runs through everywhere because we don't have a lot of water and rain. Having access to those irrigation pipelines to have water available on site.
So we're using totes, otherwise?
A very large trailer.
Okay.
Where things are going in the industry, and we've dealt with some folks in Texas that are pre-designing water management, fencing, paddocking as part of the initial design, very specifically for that matter of getting water around. One gentleman's example was, I have to hire an individual all day long just to truck water at these sites that are not. And so this is where this becomes a cost, an operational cost, which could be dramatically offset when bidding or selling solar grazing services. So those are some of the conversations we've been providing to some of our friends in the industry that are trying to figure out, what is the best layout and orientation. I think
Yeah, and I've seen some sites down south that are actually focusing more on like water collection points, obviously where they don't have drought like we do in Alberta, but there's the opportunity there to be able to harvest some of the rainfall.
Just before you go on, the Resilient Agricultural Landscape Program, or RALP, is going to have money for fencing and water solutions for livestock.
Is that
This type of
Canada or
thing.
Ontario?
Ontario.
Of course it is.
So we can accelerate the solar sheep energy transition by way of agrivoltaics. Is that a fair conclusion on the panel here? Yeah, perfect. But that's great. Well, thank you all. I know we could go longer, but I think we're out of time. So thank you.